Wonderful to be here and honored to be on the stage with these wonderful women. And so just to kick it off, I just want you to tell us a little bit about yourselves and the steps you have taken in your career that have brought you to where you are today. And I'll start with Katherine on that one.
I was hoping we would start with Laura. But it's good to see everybody. And first of all, thanks to CoMotion for the invitation and opportunity to sit here. So I've been in transportation since grad school at UCLA and have been in transportation or related fields, either appointed high-speed rail authority or in transportation, land use, and urban planning. But I evolved into a developer at one point, and then also now am moving into decarbonization. As the office leader for ARUP, which is an international engineering design firm, I head up the largest office in the States besides New York. So LA has about 320 engineers and designers. And so we are actively involved in the transition process. And being part of that is super exciting. But I got to say, it's lonely. It's very lonely. I wish we had more women and people of color working with us, but change is coming. So.
Hilary?
Yes, it's wonderful to be here. And my journey started in 1991 when I worked for Mayor Tom Bradley. And he was talking about getting the red line completed. And my goal was that as someone who wanted to build cities, I went to and got a public policy degree at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard and came and did a study with Mark Ridley Thomas in '92 about banks redlining about housing, but actually transportation was a big part of banks redlining. And the lack of access to jobs, the lack of access to capital was really affecting communities. And we talk a lot about how mobility is a women's empowerment tool. And that's really why transportation for me was such a big part of my journey. But I also was in development. I worked for a lot of elected officials, but I also worked for business organizations. And so I think one of the things I love about transportation is you can have a very different route and you're all welcome in the transportation environment. You have something to give and you can be taken seriously very early if you are focused on the ways that you want to contribute. And we'll talk more about that today.
Good morning, do I need to do something now? Oh. Good morning, everyone. I am so happy to be here. Really, I am, because the last couple of days have been a whirlwind. So I will apologize at the get-go. If I'm checking my phone, it's not because these women don't have really interesting things to say. I've been working really closely with the Mayor Karen Bass's office and responding to the closure of the 10 freeway, and things are changing literally minute by minute. So, but I can multitask. I'm a mom, I work, I can multitask, I can listen, I can take questions, I can talk, I can check email. But all that said, I've been in the transportation world for like 20 years. Started really because all I knew is I wanted to work in communities of color, socioeconomically disadvantaged communities. Wasn't quite sure what that meant. And so I found my way into transportation when I worked at the state level in the state legislature. And then I was in Sacramento. Then I asked to be transferred to the local district office. And because I was the newbie and no one understood the value of transportation, they said, welcome, you're now our transportation person. But little did they know that set me on the path to where I am today. My experience has always been either in the nonprofit or public sector. I am a public sector employee at heart. I've kind of tinkered in my mind, private, and I'm like, no, I'll stay in the public sector. That's really who I am. And I think that's a big part of figuring out what works for you, who you are, not just what do you want to do, but what do you not want to do. But, so I've worked at the local level, state, and regional. Locally, I've had the opportunity to work at the city of Montebello. I've worked most recently, city of Pasadena, and then I was at Metro for about 10 years. And I think the common thread through all of my career has been not just transportation, that's a little bit obvious, but really about where can I make the most impact, positive impact, on someone's daily life. And it's always been work that's really exciting, that's challenging, but really rewarding.
Fantastic. And I think you would all agree. I mean, that's some pretty impressive resumes up here for for these women in the transportation industry. And as women, we're still definitely a minority in the transportation industry and coming up. And as leaders, it's very impressive that you have come. And I'm sure it was very different when you started your careers than it is right now. So can you just talk about some of the like maybe top 3 challenges to get to that higher level of leadership, and how did you overcome those challenges? And maybe I'll start with you, Laura. Can you start?
Sure. Top 3 challenges. I would say finding your voice. It can be pretty intimidating when once upon a time I was the youngest person at the table, not so much anymore. The only female, woman of color or person of color, and oftentimes the only non-engineer. I am a planner by training. And so speaking up and finding your voice and being heard was a challenge, and just finding that. And oftentimes I kind of equate it to, Beyonce has her alter stage ego. You got to find your Sasha. You got to figure out who you are and just bring it and give yourself a little pep talk. So I would say that's been a challenge. Finding other women who, to support you. It's, a lot of my mentors, ironically, have been men who've seen a value and have given me a place at the table, and that's really great. But I've tried to really make an effort to reach out to other women, support other women, bring women into my circle, and I think really importantly, find women who will let you be who you are regardless of what your title is. You'll find sometimes people really like you because of your title. At the end of the day, you want people around you who are going to support you no matter what. So finding that group that allows you to be you. And thirdly, challenge, I would say bringing more women into the transportation space. Really creating pathways, and especially into middle and upper management. I can find a lot of women in entry-level positions, and then it's very male top-heavy, which is fine for a while, except that I think we're all responsible for creating those pathways. The more diverse views you have in a room, the better the result is, and that applies not just from a racial, economic, lived experience, but also from a gender perspective.
Yeah. I guess for me, one of the things that I made a very conscious decision about was that I never worked for a white elected official. That was really important to me. I worked for Mayor Bradley. I worked for Mark Ridley Thomas, African American. I worked for Richard Alarcon, Latino in East San Fernando Valley, Richard Alatorre in East LA, and then Gil Cedillo in downtown. And actually, Laura and I worked together in 2020 when Gil was an assembly person. I think it's very, very important that there is a lot of othering, and that's very limiting. That you can't speak on behalf of this unless you've lived your whole life doing something. And I think that is really a challenge, because we need to accept all voices saying that they want to work for us. I think it's great that there are a lot of men that are here that want to hear why having women at the table are so important. And that is really, really huge, because the transportation system, until it meets the needs of mothers, until it meets the needs of older women, until it meets the needs of people who need additional help, we are not going to have really created the system that we need. I think the other factor, and I will just say this, is I expected my women bosses to want to support me, and I'm going to tell you, they didn't. There are a lot of cases where back in the day, and I'm glad this is changing, where a lot of women were coming up in that feeling of there's only room for one of us. And so I think the most limiting boss I ever had was actually a female. And so you need to create pathways around that person. And one of the best pieces of advice I got from a female was, it's not who you know, it's who knows you. And that was really, really important, because when Governor Newsom appointed me to the California Transportation System Commission, lots of people knew me because I made sure that they knew me. I made sure that I put myself in leadership positions and made sure that on the weekends I was at community cleanups, doing whatever I could to make sure people knew me and was part of any mentorship opportunity. And third, I think the challenge is that we have to be accepting of how hard it is to be a parent in this field. This is a field you can spend a jillion hours on, but you also may need to spend time with your kids. That's a good thing. And so as a woman, if you are in a position to hire or have an internship, I always said when I was leading FASTLinkDTLA as a nonprofit, you can have any title other than mine as executive director because I will never let you have a hole in your resume. You don't have to work long hours. You can do whatever you need, but it is so important because we all have kids. And being on that parent track should not knock you off because actually being a parent is one of the most important things that you should have as an experience in creating a system that's going to work for everybody in transportation.
So my 3 challenges. The first one is taking unpopular positions and knowing they're the right position to take. So when I first got out of grad school, my first job was the transportation manager for the little city of South Pasadena. And that city was fighting the 710 freeway. And I remember when I took that job, I had so many political friends and personal, professional friends would say, why are you doing that? We need to build the freeway. And I'd say, it's the wrong thing. It's the wrong thing, and it was the wrong thing then, it was the wrong thing now, and we all killed it, and now we're replanning it. So I'm grateful for that, but it was very hard, and it was unpopular. And when I was appointed to the High-Speed Rail Authority by Governor Brown, that was hard because you're taking people's properties, you're taking their businesses, but you're trying to do it in the most equitable and responsible way. It's still hard, but you know it's the thing that's important to do for the state. So taking unpopular decisions but standing behind them was one of the hardest things I've had to do, but I continue to embrace those challenges. The second thing is kind of what we're all echoing, is how lonely it can be. And to find your tribe. I think Laura was saying, you know, how do we find the people that we can, will support us in what we do? And it's very funny, when I became a commissioner and when Hilary became a commissioner and when Loud is moving, it's like people say, oh, that person has to be my new best friend. And all of a sudden you start getting calls like, I don't know who you are. But because people want to get to you to influence you. And the thing that has tied us together is that we have worked together over decades. So there's no way that, in my book, it's like if somebody wants to reach out to any of my colleagues, it's like, well, what do you want to talk to them about? Because their time is special. So your tribe and really staying close to that tribe is important, whether it's national, international, or local. It's very important. And the third one is really kind of charting your own course. I am the only Latina principal at my firm in the entire Americas, which is hard because it includes South America. And so we have principals all over the world, and there's only one Latina in Canada, US, and South America. And what that tells me is that we need to continue to make strides in diversifying leadership, because perspectives matter. Perspectives really do matter. And so it's really about making more seats available at the table. And that means, I'm not saying take out, I'm saying add more seats to the table. So those are the 3. And by the way, Heather, as head of WTS, you might want to chime in on some of this.
Yeah, I did. I had a couple of things, and I agree with Laura and what she's saying. It really does, the support of men in this industry, because we are a minority in it, is really important to us. And all my mentors are also males that I've gone through in the career. But and having that women's support that Hilary mentioned is also really crucial at the higher level to bring you up, and that's where WTS comes in. I think a lot. I've made so many relationships with WTS and women in this industry in all different aspects, and it really has provided that connection and building the career within the industry and having that women's support. So did you have something to add real quick, Hilary, or no?
No.
Okay.
Actively
Yeah, she's ready for the next. She's but while we're talking about bringing women into the transportation space and building that network and expanding it, I was just going to, how can we, the public and private sectors, kind of work together in partnership to leverage support initiatives aimed at attracting and retaining women in transportation-related careers, and what role can government policies play in promoting gender equality in the industry?
So I do want
It's a loaded
to buzz
question.
in on that one. The very first and most important thing is we need to acknowledge that on this dais could be African American women, Asian women. I mean, the diversity does not end. And I think what's most important is we need to invest in access to capital for women entrepreneurs in the transportation space. We do not have enough women that have access to capital to be prime contractors. We do not have enough opportunities for people to get good contracts. And so speak up for women. Be people who vote with your feet for women contractors. I'm pleased to work with a company called Butterfly that is a black women-owned wheelchair accessible vehicle firm. And when we did a project with our TMO, we made sure that Butterfly and SMS that she owns was the contractor. Promote women at all times and make sure that you're asking the question, which we do from the dais. And I know Katherine did at High Speed Rail. How many women did you employ? Who got to the contracts? Who's leading? Because if we're not asking the questions as women, it's not going to seem like that's important. We've got to make those paths to getting wealthy, those paths to hiring other women, and the banking system and the opportunities to mentor have to be seen as something you all care about. Those points are important in our RFPs, and meeting it in a real way and not a perfunctory way will be very, very important coming up, and as always now. So support women, empower women, and enrich women, and you will be very happy you did.
Very successful.
I'll go real quickly. So when the Supreme Court made its terrible decision on diversity and equity in universities, we doubled down on our DE&I commitments. And what we did was at our firm, we acknowledged that we had to accelerate our efforts, and we needed to actually double down in terms of what we were doing externally. So yes, internally we were doing all these things, but I said, no, nobody knows what we're doing. And it's important to not let these other outside voices shift what we need to be kind of changing in the landscape. This will not change. I used to be always, Lauda said it, I was always the woman, I was always a person of color. And now, when I'm the only woman, because I generally still am, others will say, my gosh, we need more diversity, because now it is self-evident. It's not as prevalent as it should be, but it needs to be universally understood and appreciated that things need to improve, because we keep designing transportation systems and networks for 30-year-old white men because that's who's designing them. That's the problem. And that's what I think we need to stop doing. I remember the former DOT director, Selena Reynolds. She would always say this, like, we got to start changing the people who are actually designing these transit stops, designing these bike corridors, making sure they're lit and well and safe, and also family friendly. So that's not going to change until the people who are designing these things change. So it needs to start, and it just needs to grow at all the levels. So I acknowledge what we're all trying to do here, and certainly, Heather, the work at WTS is really something to be supported.
So I will add that one of the first things I notice when I first enter into a position and I meet with my executive team is I notice what the diversity landscape of that team is. And what I have found is there is oftentimes one woman, everyone else male. And I think it's really important, whether you're private or public sector, that you create those pathways in a meaningful way for women who not only have potential, but who are interested in moving up in their career. Not everyone does, and I'm gonna respect that. But oftentimes, we create mentorship programs, whether it's internally or informally, but it needs to mean something. You need to really be mindful of what this person's long-term career goals are. How do you create opportunities? It might not always be a promotion. It might not always be a title change. It might be getting them into the room so that they get noticed. It might be cross-training so that they build a skill they're lacking that's preventing them from moving up. So mentorships are super important, but they have to be mindful and they have to be deliberate. In terms of kind of the gender perspective in transportation, I'll geek out a little bit and I'll say this is where data becomes really important. Numbers don't lie, data doesn't lie. You have to look at who's using the system, and there's a disconnect between who's using the system, what their travel patterns look like, and the way we're designing the system. And that gets to Katherine's point. You need the right people in the room with the right life experiences and the right perspective, or at least a sensitivity to those life experiences and perspective, to design a system that actually meets the needs of the public who you are serving. That's not easy. Sometimes it's not inexpensive, and it's absolutely complicated. But if we are going to make any impact in a mode shift, if we're going to make any impact in making sure that women feel safe traveling on public transportation, we absolutely have to be planning for women, women with children. It's a drag carrying a stroller up a bus. And don't get me started on those beautiful cobblestone sidewalks that are a killer to walk in heels and to push a baby sleeping in a stroller. The last thing you want is that baby crying. So we have to be mindful what's aesthetically pleasing, what sounds right, what makes sense from A to B. Works on paper, doesn't always work when you actually put it into practice.
Absolutely, and I think just to kind of close, I know that we are all women up here. These are women in leadership, so we have made it. We are making strides. We are getting better, I think, as a whole in the industry of bringing women into the transportation realm, engineering realm, planning realm, but there's still a lot more work to be done there. And I just wanted real quick, I know that, Katherine, you had mentioned about DEI and what the Supreme Court, and I just wonder how many other companies kind of did a restructuring to kind of accommodate that. I know a lot of companies really looked at that and made some changes within the organization to kind of support that. And so we talked about being parents, being moms, and we talked about the 30-year-old white men, and so my next, we're planning for this, our infrastructure, right? So then, in what ways do existing transportation policies and infrastructure fail to address the specific safety and accessibility challenges that women may face, thereby excluding them from fully participating in urban mobility? And I know we touched a little bit on that, but I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into that.
Sure. I mean, I'll build a little bit upon my rant. We have to be sensitive and mindful of who our customers are, and we have to be willing to think outside the box. And oftentimes the most difficult thing is to be the person with the most unpopular opinion in the room saying, no, that will not work. We have to provide shelters at bus stops. We have to provide lighting. I think it's great that Metro has a transit ambassador program, but how do we also think about building in programs like that into the first last mile so that women not just feel comfortable at a bus stop, at a rail station, on the public transportation system, but getting to and from the station and their final destination. So we really need to kind of think of this holistically, because it's not just about once they get there, it's about how they're getting there.
Yeah. I guess one of the things in the system that, and I completely agree with Laura on this, that now you're seeing bathrooms and other things get added on to Metro because Stephanie Wiggins is hearing from all these women saying, why are there no bathrooms? We should issue every transportation planner a child that needs to go to the bathroom. Like, if you've been on a bus or taken the train and you don't know where to change your kid, or we're not going to get people out of their cars until we understand what people's lives are really like and what the lives you actually want to lead as well are. I also think that it's really, really important when we keep talking about this age of innovation. We have a wonderful opportunity. There's this term of like fail, learn, repeat. But if you are female, let me just say this idea of like fail, learn, repeat, you have to be very supported by the people around you because men have failed hugely. And yet when women have failed at something, and it will be like a tenth of what happened in some other situation, it's always, well, that's what happens when you hire women. You don't say like, oh, that's what happens when you hire men. When you need to stick up for women all the time, every time, without fail. You need to recognize when LADOT is doing something awesome, you need to talk about it. When ARUP is doing something awesome, you need to talk about it and say, it's because women are leading it that this is happening. Because the more that we start the clarion call that women succeed, women lead, and when you invest in women, you succeed, that's when you've really done something. But now, more than ever, make sure that if there's anything that you do today, while you're on your way up to the top, travel with someone, make sure they're safe on a train, answer questions, be a companion. Stick up for a woman today, point out something that a woman-owned business has done or a woman leader like people next to me have done, and always think, what would my mom do in this situation? Would she feel comfortable in the same train I'm on? Because if you answer no, then what do you want to do about that? What do you want to tell Metro? What do you want to tell LADOT that needs to change so that we can actually have a system we're all going to be proud of when we're in the tomorrow and when we're in the international arena with the Olympics?
Thanks for reminding us about the Olympics. That's happening hot and fast. I did want to just say that, ARUP actually did a bunch of studies looking at the future of cities, in particular how to design safe communities for women and women of indigenous backgrounds, people of different backgrounds, because there's a very different way the cultural experiences have how they use space, their journey. We got to understand those journeys because it's very different. And so understanding those perspectives and bringing those into the planning process is critical. So I think, just not to echo what they're saying, I think it's important that we all kind of understand that there's not a one-size-fits-all, and we certainly need to be much better and much more flexible in this kind of post-COVID environment. When we're rebuilding and redoing things, let's do it better. Let's do it much more inclusively and with a lot more equity and consideration for those who are most vulnerable in our communities. So we have a chance right now with our reset. I figure this is kind of a big reset, and let's just kind of do it better and a notch up.
Absolutely, and I'll just add, as a recent mother, the COVID, I'm thankful for COVID because I have more flexibility and I'm able to stay at home a little bit and be there for him and work from home and have off hours. So it has benefited, and so to your reset, I hope that mindset kind of stays. Also, as Hilary was talking about the train, I did that. I took my mom on a train, and she goes, "Are you sure this is safe?" And after that, she was like, she told me she didn't want me taking it. She's like, I don't care how much parking costs. You pay for parking. You do it that way. So to her point, we do need to be more active in thinking about the safety of the women in being on our public transportation system. So we have about 10 minutes left, and I did want to open it up to the crowd if there are any questions. Yeah, go ahead.
It's okay, she's grabbing.
Thank you. So first, I'd like to say this was a really insightful conversation, and I feel like I've got to know each one of you better. So to step back and maybe think about what's happening in transportation, there's a lot of support, especially from the federal government with the infrastructure bill and lots of funding coming in. When you look at what's happening, how do you each respectively make sure you're getting, you know of the innovation in the market? How do you get to know that information, whether nationally or internationally? And how do you apply that to yourselves and also within the teams you work with?
So I'll go first. One of the things is I teach. I'm an adjunct professor at both UCLA and USC in the real estate and urban planning programs. Not at the same time, but one of the things I used to say to my students is go to Austin, go to Denver, go to San Francisco, go someplace else because there's no jobs. There were no jobs, but now all the innovation is here. All of the innovation and creativity and now money is here. And there's no better time to be in transportation. And it doesn't matter if it's in jobs or the environment or mobility or decarbonization. I think this is the most, technology, this is the most dynamic time that you could ever find a role or career. And there's no more better opportunity to have phenomenal legacy impact. And we have the games, we have FIFA, we have a whole bunch of stuff happening here, and there's this giant engine that's just pushing us. And so if you want to start something new and you want to do something fun, stay in Los Angeles until 2029 or 2030. But it is an exciting time. So with the money from the feds, from the state, from local investment, there's plenty to do.
I'll add to that. It's really about how do you leverage a moment in time to advance transportation solutions that might otherwise not get very far. Heather talked about COVID. In Pasadena, we had looked at on-street dining for the longest time. We had looked at other opportunities to make our streets more pedestrian-friendly and bicycle-friendly. And it was always, no, we need customers to park right at our doorstep, otherwise they won't come in. No, because we can't have bikes here or whatnot. COVID changed that real quick. And so we took that opportunity and, it's now on-street dining is a long-term thing in Pasadena. We saw bicycling going up, we saw pedestrian activity going up, and that led to the department developing a pedestrian transportation action plan. Similarly, when I was at Metro, we had, for a moment in time, I was overseeing the active transportation at Metro, and there was a change on the board that really made it a board that was much more favorable to active transportation programs. And that gave me the little crack in the door I needed to push it wide open and say, we're running as fast as we can before this board changes and cycles out. Implemented Metro Bike Share, implemented Open Streets grant programs. So it's not just about leveraging the funding opportunities, keeping in mind the Olympics, definitely lots of funding, lots of things that we're thinking about in coordination with LA 28 and Metro about what we want to implement at the City of LA, but it's also taking leveraging that moment in time that might be very narrow and how much can you push forward to show that change can be good.
I would just add, the CTC right now is doing two major things. One is we're doing a program with SB 671 to completely change our goods movement corridors to zero emission. The other is under SB 1121, a 10-year plan of the entire infrastructure investments needed in the state. And people don't realize that the CTC manages $5 to $8 billion a year of the gas tax. So I was appointed in 2019. I was chair in 2020 and 2021. In the 4 years I've been on, we have moved $40 billion. And that's just in gas tax money. It's not the federal dollars. It's not the other dollars. With all of this once-in-a-generation money, though, people need to realize you have to apply for it. So Laura and ARUP and so many of the entities are furiously applying for this money, and you are not going to get it until someone has a brilliant idea that they put on paper and compete well. So if you have a great idea, talk to people and make sure that we get the work done and look at how innovative we can be, because this next 5 years is going to be like going from the horse and buggy to the car was in the last century. There is so much on the table, so much innovation, and people are doing so much hard work. And speaking of hard work, I just want to have us give a shout out to Rubio-Cornejo, because I'm surprised she's even here. She's not gotten any sleep since the 10 freeway issue. And just Mayor Bass and Laura have been so on the spot, making sure that they can rebuild back better. I just really want to commend you for like an extraordinary job. Well done.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Do we have time for one more question? Yeah? Anybody else have any?
Hi, thank you. I think just to end it like on a high note, not that all of this hasn't been really great to hear, but in those moments when you're getting frustrated, when you're feeling isolated as a woman in the position or in the field, what kind of things, and you've given a lot of great advice, so thank you for that, but what kind of things are inspiring you? What do you look to for inspiration in those moments when you're just like, you know, and you need to kick that next door down and you need to keep going?
You know what? That's a great question. Like, what inspires us? Because we've been at this a long time, and it's hard. You know, it can be hard. I would say my students inspire me because they're idealists. They haven't been squished, 10 different ways, and they challenge. They say, "Why, professor? Why?" They don't accept things, and they don't put up with intolerance. So they expect, equity. They expect diversity. They expect responsible environmental, practices. There's like, well, why aren't we doing things like that? And because they know that they have a lot of work to kind of fix what's been done, but they know that they can, and they know that they will. So my students, and then when I see them, I hire them, and I see them in city halls, I see them at Metro and stuff, and they'll run up and they'll tell me what they've done, like a story of what they overcame, and they said, "You told me I could do this." And that's the stuff that keeps me going. So 16 years I've been teaching, and I will continue to do that until I can't, or they fire me. But I just feel like the youth are the ones that give me inspiration.
What gives me inspiration is thinking about the economy of the future and what it's going to mean to have women participate at the levels that we should. And right now, when you talk to workforce investment boards, they say we do not have a skills imbalance in this region. We have a transportation and a childcare imbalance. And every day that we can help someone no longer have their car, we've just put $10,000 a year back in their pocket. It means so much about the future of this region if we can travel better, if we can put people to work, if we can clean the air. And what inspires me every day is how many people are working long hours to make the system better. There is so much innovation happening right now. People are so underemployed because what they want to do is just invest in a system that's going to work, and a system where they see that people of all colors and throughout the region are going to have an equitable opportunity to actually have a better life. That is huge for me. And a great story was when I first started working for Mark Ridley Thomas, and in 1992, the civil disturbance happened, and in Leimert Park, Mark Ridley Thomas was like, "We are not going to come back as South LA until we have a train running down here." And it's sad because it took so long, but 30 years later, my son got to work on the opening of the K line because he was working at Metro in Leimert Park, and he was like, "Mom, this is what you've been talking about all this time." And that first day, people were crying because this was the culmination of the dream they had and why they felt so angry in 1992, and that this was finally the justice they deserved. And that's what keeps me up.
And now I have to follow that. I would say for me, it's really bringing it full circle to why I got into transportation, making a difference in communities of color, in disadvantaged communities. When I hear those anecdotal stories from people who have benefited from something that I played a role in, when I see a project that is still there years later. One of my favorite projects remains what was before First Last Mile. We call them community linkages at Metro. And there was funding set aside as part of the East Side extension to East Los Angeles. And working with the city of Los Angeles, we worked to implement not just first last mile improvements in Boyle Heights, but non-standard improvements, which was not easy because, no, I can say this now because I work for the city of LA, we don't like non-standard. But we got them done, and they're still there. And they're beautiful and they're reflective of the community. We worked with local artists, and to see that still there, like a decade later, is really amazing. And it's a reminder on those really difficult days, those days when like you don't get the direction you want from your board, when your boss isn't the easiest. Not my current boss. My current boss is amazing. But, you know, those tough days, for me, that's what inspires me. There's a difference you're making in someone's life at the most intimate level. And sometimes they don't even realize it. You played a role in that. That's what inspires me.
And I'll just, I do want to add to that a little bit. And I do want to echo what everybody said, but then pinpoint what Katherine was talking about, our next generation of future leaders and bringing them in. And with WTS, we just had our awards gala a couple nights ago. We gave away 29 scholarships to women with $113,000. And you know, when you listen to them, they want to change the world. They're going to change the world. They're very confident in what they're going to do and how we're going to do. And I think a lot of us sit back and go, oh, yeah, but then you'll hit this roadblock. Then you'll hit this roadblock, you know, and we kind of go, but you love their optimism, right? And it's great to hear. But I just think what I think about in those hard times is what we do is vital to everybody. Everybody uses some form of transportation, and it's a need. And you know, and I think that we lose that sometimes. We don't think about everybody needs transportation. What we do to keep everything moving is extremely important for our economy and for everybody's lives to work. So, and when it doesn't, when the 10 shuts down, you know, everybody like doesn't know what to do. Everything goes chaotic, you know, and that's just a little piece of things, you know, when the train isn't on time or when it comes early and you miss it or your bus is late and you miss your next connection. All those things are very important for people to get to work. And it was really eye-opening for me when I would drive into work in the morning and I'd see people running to their next bus to catch the next bus because they got to get somewhere, and they're dependent on that, and how fortunate I am to even have a car that can get me from point A to point B when others aren't. So just think about what you do is very important in your day-to-day lives, and continue to do what you do and expanding our transportation and making it that much better. So thank you, ladies. I think we're all out of time for today. I hope you enjoyed our discussion, and enjoy the rest of the conference.